My name is Frank Stephenson. I am the Director of Design for McLaren in England, and I want to speak to you today about how important design is in our world and in general for designers to move the products forward and to innovate. So my career has been a little bit varied, or quite a bit varied actually, in terms of what I've done in my career. I'm not finished yet. I have a long ways to go, and I'm on an incredible journey that I could only dream about when I was very young. And I'm immensely lucky, very lucky, to be in the position I am, because it's the only thing I think I know how to do. And I get to do it every day of my life now. It's something that I do every day of my life, Monday to Monday, and I live it with a great passion. So these, first of all, are a few of the products that I've been most involved with, the most important things I've worked on until today. And you can see the range of design here. So each one is very important for me. They're all like your children. Each one is important, so none of them have more value than the other one, but they are all done with different messages and different missions to reach the customers. The top one is the first product I ever designed in the automotive world. It's the Ford Escort Cosworth. Very lucky to be involved in a car that raises a lot of emotions in design, because it's very sporty, and of course all designers want to do sport cars. But it was a very, very good challenge for me to begin my career with. The next product was from BMW, the first ever SUV from BMW. It was called the X5. And I was very lucky to work on this project from the very beginning. Design works were also involved. And we were able to build this car from zero, from scratch, as a new segment for BMW, based on existing technology from Land Rover. But I worked with the best 3 modelers in the world to create it. It was the original team who modeled the Lamborghini Miura in the 60s, and they were still working when I was able to work on this project. A gentleman named Chris Chapman from California was also involved with it, and we had a fabulous time coming up with something that was regarded as almost now an icon for BMW in this segment. After that, I was involved in the Mini design, the Mini Cooper design. This could take many, many hours to speak about, but I will condense it to a very short few minutes maybe. This car probably was the beginning of something that created my career, because it became very widely known and very well studied in terms of how it became successful. I will explain more later about it, but it was basically the reinterpretation of an icon, and a British icon, and it was being handled by a German company. So the dynamics of the process of developing this new car was very delicate. We had to get it right. There was no room for failure. The car must be successful and be interpreted later as an English product rather than a German product. So the story behind that was very, very interesting, to say the least. After the Mini, a lot of offers were coming through because it was successful for the company, and it showed a way of handling the past with the future. And I wasn't in a position to move because I was very excited to remain with the Mini program about the future family, the future development of the brand. And my personal feeling was to stay with BMW and Mini. But one phone call came through that was just very mysterious, and it was to work with an outside company in another country, and a very good position was being offered. I had no idea, but it was, when I did interview, the opportunity to move up to a very, very good level for a designer, which was the design director position for Ferrari and Maserati in the home headquarters in Italy. And as exciting as it may sound to receive this position or this offer, it was the scariest thing I ever had in my life occur to me. And you grow into these positions but I was a little bit worried that I wasn't going to be the right person for this position because you don't have that much experience, or I hadn't had that much experience up to then. The products I'd worked on were successful, but it didn't give me enough courage to be in that position. But if anybody gets an offer like that, it only happens one time in your life, and I think it's the most important thing is to remember that when you did have things occur in your life, that you went for it, that you accepted change, and you made the best of it. So I was able to move there and put all my energy into not making a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes, but if you have a chance, then go for it. So one of the things I've always remembered from that experience that is change is good. Change is very, very good for you. Scary, but the magic happens when you move out of your comfort zone. And that's pretty much what happened. I was able to move into this position and grow with it and create something where I started to develop confidence in myself and to be successful and give good products back to the company, working with their design language, their design teams in Turin, and developing products that were successful. So that would have included the Grand Sport Maserati, the Maserati MC12, the FXX Super Enzo, and the F430 Ferrari. So those were projects that I specifically put my hand in and worked very hard to make them work well for the company. And then the worst day of my life, or the scariest day of my life, when on a Friday evening I was homesick in Modena, Italy. I had man flu, the worst disease known to man. When men have flu, it's worse than giving birth. And I thought, okay, relax, just get better. The phone rang, and it was the boss of Ferrari telling me, or asking me how I was feeling. I told him, of course, I wasn't feeling very well. And he said, well, have a glass of champagne, because on Monday, you're going to Fiat. And that was, for me at that moment, like going from heaven or paradise to hell, because Fiat was not doing very well. It was the company that you didn't want to even know about, because it was not very successful. And they mentioned that they had a project, or a new director on board who needed a project done very quickly to save Fiat, and you have 10 months to design a new car that will turn the fortunes of Fiat around and make them very successful. So I'm sure a lot of you know that development time is very important to get a product right, to make sure that the product fits the market, is safe, and the quality is high, of course. But 10 months is impossible to design a new car and develop it for the market. So I did a small trick that I must confess to, which is I didn't really make a new car or design a new car. Our design team concentrated on turning an existing product into a new product by just facelifting it, making a major facelift. So we took an existing car that didn't need to be tested, which was the Fiat Panda. It was the only car that was sellable, and we put a new body or new dress on it, and we turned the Fiat Panda into the Fiat 500. And this was pretty much like if you're in the gym with your gym clothes, you come home, you put on a nice suit, a nice dress, you're still the same person, but you have a new look to you, a very different look. And the idea behind this was very similar to what we did with the Mini. It was take a car which was very iconic already, the Fiat 500, and readdress it for the 21st century. So it was taking the emotion of the past and putting the technology of the future into it. So the car basically represented a spiritual successor to the original. And again, in 10 months it was ready, and it became a huge hit. It became the car to have for the fashion thinking people, and the car that moved Italy back into the worldwide segment of small cars. Then I received a phone call shortly after that, and it was to move to McLaren, which for me then was also unbelievable. If I was in paradise at Ferrari, then suddenly this was the offer to go to heaven almost, because this was starting with a clean sheet of paper and having to develop a new look, or a family look, for McLaren. They only do race cars, or they had done only race cars, and the objective was to design a language for the road car division. So it was a brand new opportunity to create a design language, a DNA, or a genetic start for a company that was already existing at a high level. but turning it into something more practical and more usable. And that, for any designer, is the biggest opportunity you can have, is to do something from zero, from a clean sheet of paper, and hopefully successfully develop a design language that will stick and form the basic building blocks for the future of the design of the company. So in particular, I want to speak today a little bit about the two products that have been most important for me to date. One is, as we call it, the iconic Mini, the original Mini. This car was born in 1959, and it remained the same car for 40 years until 1999, right around 2000, when it was launched in Paris as the new Mini. And I can tell you this was probably the most funnest, if that's a word, the most funnest product designed ever, because the challenges and the complications in the design process and the whole dynamics, as I mentioned earlier, the whole dynamics of the design process were incredibly different, incredibly challenging, and the amount of collaboration that we had to have to make this product a success was something that a book could be very interesting to do about. It was everything I could put into a project in terms of design input and forward thinking, but maintaining a faithful reinterpretation of the original, and watching it go from your mind to a physical product was incredible, to say the least. The other product is the McLaren F1, which is probably the most iconic supercar of the 20th century. It's the car that every other supercar has been measured to, and it still maintains its value today in terms of what it has achieved. It's a very special car in the segment where you don't need a car like this. These products aren't really necessary for anybody to have, but there's an intrinsic value of what it means in this segment. It is the most uncompromised car ever designed. So what makes these products very, very desirable? I think it's the design. Of course, the engineering is very important, but these are cars that you have to put money, your hard-earned money, your basic desire has to come out, and you have to be able to purchase this product because you believe in it. And a lot of products in the segment or in the market in the world today are bought solely because when you first see them, you need them. All these products work perfectly. They have a great function, and the design shows through the function. So you can see, obviously, Levi's, Rolex watches, many other ones, of course, but these are products that are identifiable as iconic, I think. The chair from Mr. Ames and Apple products, these are all very desirable products. Nobody criticizes them for their looks, but they also function extremely well. And so if you look at what inspires designers, it depends on, obviously, on what you're designing for, but if you're looking for timelessness, something that will last for a long time to achieve sort of the iconic value, nothing becomes iconic at the very start. It takes many years to develop a belief in it, a trust in the product, and something that you can believe you have the best of the best. So when I design a product, my most important influence is nature. As Mr. Pelli said, there's an honesty to nature that is second to none. We're designing products for people who will have to develop a trust in us as a company. So when designers go, for example, to fashion design shows or to furniture shows, architectural influences, they're looking at products that have, say, a short life cycle or a short moment of influence. Things are in and out of fashion very quickly. If we're designing a product like a car, we don't want the product to have a short life cycle. We want it to be a bit longer lasting than that. And what is more longer lasting than nature as a design influence? I think nothing is. So we look at products that come from nature, and we use these as influence in our designs to develop something that will be regarded almost as timeless. And of course, if you're designing a product that the person has to buy, you need to add that secret ingredient, which is what we call in English the wow factor, that emotional moment where you think, I need to have that product. Without that, the product is probably not going to be successful. It's very rare that you will buy a product that you don't like the look of. Nobody walks by a shop window and sees a shirt and thinks, I don't like that shirt, but maybe in 6 months I will like it, so I will buy it now. It doesn't happen. So the product has to have at the very beginning a desirability factor, the wow factor, again, as I call it. And there are things in nature, there are things that are made by hand that you have this feel for, instant desirability, and that's what makes you want the product. Of course, later you fall in love with the product. For example, a partner, if you meet your partner the first time, usually it's the physical side that you get attracted to, and then if the other side, the emotional side of what they're like, or how they behave, if that's interesting, you start to fall in love with them. Much like a car, if you like the outside of the car, you start to fall in love with it. When you get inside the car and it performs well, you like the inside of the car, you're learning its personality, then you really fall in love with it. So products like these are very important to add this emotional appeal to it. I just picked up our new puppy. It's the one on the left, obviously, and it's a Bernese Mountain Dog. I couldn't walk away from it. I needed that puppy. On the right, I used to be an avid skateboarder in my youth. I'm probably not the most fittest person to be on a skateboard now, but recently I was able to receive a skateboard on the right. It is made from wood in Vermont, wood being a natural thing in nature, of course, but the beauty of it is just fascinating for me. And even though I'll probably be hurt when I ride it, which I don't mind, I just had to have the product. It's desirable just when you look at it. So this is what I call the wow factor, or the emotional appeal of a factor. If you could build this into the design from the beginning, you're halfway to making the product successful. Then again, in nature, you'll see that design is what makes it very attractive, obviously. None of these things that you see on the images behind me are designed to be beautiful. Designed they are, but upstairs, I think, from somebody who really understands design, but they're designed to perform. There's again, this honesty of design where performance is the main factor. These have a look. They're successful because of this look. They survive. There's survival of the fittest, as you call it, and there's a reason behind the aesthetic attraction of these nature-driven animals and birds and fish and everything. So why are they attractive? This is very, very interesting. I've been a fan of this all my life, and it's the law of proportions, what we call the golden law of proportions. It has to do with Fibonacci. It has to do with the Vitruvian Man. There's a proportion in nature which is very, very interesting, but at the same time very strange and very bewildering. 1.618. If you can remember that number, I can guarantee that anything you design will have success. I use this all the time, strangely enough, and it gives you a natural feeling to your products. Why? I can't explain it. But if you look at trees, you look at leaves, you look at roots, you look at cells, seashells, sunflower seeds, they're all designed with a 1.618 ratio. There is a scientific side to design, believe me. If people say it's just art, art is something completely different to design. We use a lot of science in art because it just naturally makes the product feel correct. If a product feels correct, it's correct. So it's important to understand that design is design, taste is taste. There is good design and bad design. We can measure that, but we can't measure taste. Taste, you can have good taste or bad taste, and that is your decision, I guess. But if we want to understand what makes good design, we have to look into nature and deeply into nature. Leonardo da Vinci understood the values of it. He used it often in his designs, and it's the most intelligent influence I think that we can come up with. It applies, it works, and it feels natural for us as designers to use this, and it basically makes a product look very attractive in a natural way. When I began the project of the Mini back in 1995, BMW, in their intent to make the Mini successful, decided that they had to do a large, very wide design theme search. So we had 15 models from around the world. developed to cover the whole possibility of what a Mini for the 21st century could look like. And so we had 1 month to develop the design and 5 months to actually build the car. And we were separated. We had no influence from other designers. It was your interpretation. So each designer had his idea of what this car could look like. But I started very slowly for the first month. I designed what could the Mini look like or have looked like if it had changed every 10 years. So my first week of design was the 1969 Mini. The second week was the 1979 Mini. Third week, 1989, and the last week was 1999. So the 1999 Mini sketch on the fourth week was basically my interpretation of how the Mini could have evolved. It didn't, but it didn't have this genetic link or this DNA approach, but if it had, this is how I was able to maintain the feeling of the original Mini, but take it into the future. So it was a logical progression, as if your grandfather, your great-grandfather, or great-grandmother evolved slowly into you. You might have the same characteristics, a little bit of the same personality, look, but you're a bigger, better, stronger, faster version of your ancestors. So that's very important for me in design, is not to lose awareness of the past, connect it, but do it in a way that moves everything in a very positive way forward. That's why I often reject the idea or the insinuation that the Mini is a retro design. It is a modern version of the existing car and meant to be a faithful reinterpretation of the spirit, but moved into the future. So what I really feel strongly about is the saying when they say form follows function, that function is the driving force. Of course it is, but form does not follow function. Believe me, I've thought very hard and very long about this. It makes me angry to see this, because what I believe is form equals function. So if you have a product that functions very well, it naturally will look great. So of course you have to place importance on what it looks like, but make the product work, and then it will naturally look excellent or very nice in its final phase of design. And how do you achieve this? Well, often we have this reputation of being at odds or against the engineers because they try to destroy our design, they try to make it simple, they try to reach compromises. And of course you don't want your baby to change, you want your baby to be dressed by you, you want it to behave the way you want it to behave, and you're very protective of your design. So anybody who comes along and tries to make this product different than what you intended it to be is your enemy. So we have this at odds relationship with engineers, typically. But because when I started at McLaren, I was able to start from zero, from scratch. I was able to design a design studio around me that had the optimal working relationship to turn something into a great product from your first dream or your first idea into the final product. And my idea was to go against the grain, against what was typical, which is designers sit here, engineers sit there, and they meet after the design is finished or reached, and then the engineers try to turn this product into a real car. There's always going to be conflict, and it's not going to be what the designer intended because this happens too late in the design process. So my idea was if we can integrate from the very beginning the designers and the engineers in one studio, so the engineers are on the side of the designers. The engineer's job is to turn the impossible, the dream of the designers, into the possible, what the people will buy at the end. And how do you do that? You need crazy engineers. You need engineers who are just as crazy as the designers. That is the only way you can achieve innovation. Typically, we have engineers that are not sure about how to turn a product into a real realization, because they're worried about the cost, they're worried about the feasibility, they haven't done it that way before, they're not sure about the quality, so they're protecting themselves by making it a very conservative product. But if you have an engineer who's not worried about the time, will stay as late as we typically stay at work. We can stay all night and still enjoy our job. The crazy engineer will do just the same. And at McLaren, we're very lucky to have these type of engineers. They're not regular car engineers. Their only intent is to make something work. And we're designing, in this way, we're designing concept cars that are reality. We're not designing cars for a show that later will come back after the crowd or the people who see the car say, yes, I would buy it. Typically what they do is they take a designer, leave them in the studio for six months, design something that is absolutely amazing to look at. They present it at the auto show. The public goes crazy and says, build it, build it. They bring it back and the engineer looks at it and says, you can't even get inside the car. You can't see out of the car. You will kill somebody when you hit this car. It's just not feasible this way, and they make the car a normal product. But if you start out with the engineers working together with the designers, you're not spinning your wheels, you're not wasting your time, and you're making something that can become possible, like I said, from the impossible. So it's very important to integrate the two teams together from the very beginning. And what we call this, in terms of developing designs, is what you may realize here or understand better than myself, is the yin-yang principle, where they're not at odds with each other. They work together and they create emotionally functioning or highly functioning products, and that becomes what we call a successful product at the end. And of course, every company has its management levels that you have to get through to design this kind of product. But if you understand that designers are the professionals, and let the designers do the job the way they see it best, and you have a good design team, then you will come out with a successful product, because too oftentimes companies are set up such that the management determines the design instead of the designer. If they have confidence, the designer will say, this is the product, this is the way I see it best, and that product will be driven by the design. And management, typically, the way I'm working now, will accept our design. If we get it wrong, that's the end of the design. But typically, if you let the designers drive the project, it will be a successful product in the end. So we have a very flat, structured level at the moment where design leads. When we design these very high-end products, we design supercars, hypercars. They're not needed. You don't need a car like this, but it's necessary to do something that is what we call the calling card, or the ultimate limit of your technology. You have to design something very special. This is the P1. This is our ultimate car. And typically, your reactions to this car should be a sense of unbelievable, an unbelievable sensation when you see the car at the beginning, because it should not appear to be a real car. So that's why the bottom image is the image that a lot of people, or the feeling that a lot of people received when they saw our car for the first time. What is the front and what is the back of the car? My boss said that to me. He said, I won't approve this car, but if you think it's the right car, the right design, go with it. I don't know which is the front and which is the back of the car. I would kill the project now if it was me, but if you believe in it, go forward with it. He let us go forward with it, and we have a very successful product at the moment. Like I mentioned with Haute Couture, it doesn't feel comfortable when you see it, but it is something that is pushing the edges of technology, and if we don't push the edges of technology, it's very difficult to innovate. So we have to do things that seem way out there and make them possible. The designer's dream, the engineers turn the product into reality. Like I said earlier, if we don't have the dreamers, we don't have the people who are pushing the limits, we're not going to reach innovation. So at McLaren, our designers are, like I said, typically OCD, typically crazy, but that's the only way to push the limits. And we're turning these projects from concepts into reality with engineers who are able to think in that fashion. Obviously, we're going further ahead with the designs, but at some point they'll meet and you'll turn into something that is very special. Family feeling, very important, because if you don't have a family feeling, it's a bit of a confused look in the whole range. So we have to develop cars that look like brothers and sisters or cousins when they're in one showroom, one area. So that you have to develop a design language that is consistent, not too consistent, because then you start to overlap too much and it becomes a boring product or boring range. But you have to include uniqueness to each design. But again, it's a very delicate balance. And if you get it right, you can develop cars that do have enough uniqueness, enough differentiation to them to create something very exciting for the lower end all the way up to the higher end. Where are we going? Very difficult to say where we're going at the moment. We heard 50 years ago that cars would be flying today, that we wouldn't have wheels on cars. Hasn't happened. It'll probably never happen. And so it's a little bit difficult to predict what's coming in the next 20, 50 years. What we do know is that we have a responsibility as designers to push it in the right way, to make the cars, again, very emotional, very appealing, and desirable, but to be also very, very clued in, very aware of the environment, what we have to do to push the cars forward in the proper direction. There's a lot of talk about autonomous driving, about power units that can not influence the world negatively, but this is all something that we're investigating. I could speak many, many more hours on which directions we're heading, but it's all still up in the air. And again, it's the main responsibility of the designer to know these things, to be aware of them. So I want to say thank you, but also I want to show you very quickly a short video, 1 minute long, and this will show you the importance of getting very close to the sun. It sounds a little bit funny, but when you see the video, you will understand that the only way to bring innovation to design is to push the very limits and to do some things that haven't been done before, make the world much more exciting, much more appealing, and just a better place to live. So thank you very much.
They say you should never fly too close to the sun. But if we never dare to challenge ourselves, how do we ever break new ground?